Hello, everybody. Welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, April 30th. Holland Squallen quit Stuktumuk Squamish Okmeo. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish's website following the meeting. If you have any concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting, which is Melissa today. Could I have someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Greenlaw. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So our first order of business is a presentation from Sea to Sky Community Services around the Youth Services Annual Presentation. So I will turn it over to you fine folks.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Devin Guest, and I'm Acting Director of Recreation Culture here at the District of Squamish. I'm joined tonight by Caitlin Anderson, Manager of Youth Services for Sea to Sky Community Services, and we're pleased to present the 2023-24 Youth Services Annual Report and highlights. We're also very excited to have this PR opportunity to showcase all of the good youth services available, and we'll take full advantage of it.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Anderson. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as the Manager of Youth Services for Sea to Sky Community Services. I am here today to present on Squamish Youth Services for 2023 to 2024. I acknowledge that the programs and services are provided on the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation people. Gonna have to do that one. Throughout this presentation, I will give you an overview of youth services, provide some big picture findings from our benchmarking report, and walk you through various highlights of our year. I will leave you with what our team will be focusing on for the coming seasons and look forward to taking your questions. To start off, here's the makeup of youth services at Sea to Sky Community Services. And you can see the buckets that the District of Squamish funds in blue and what I will be talking with you about today. Squamish Youth Services provides access to a variety of programming and services for youth ages 12 to 24 years old. Programs are based in Squamish and we welcome all youth. Programs range from a drop-in space to registered programs and activities, workshops, trainings, outings, community and school engagement, and more. Youth can access support, resources, referrals to programs and services that support their well-being. Our goal is to support various aspects of the Squamish Youth Strategy, including the vision for youth to thrive to their highest potential and be healthy, happy, and engaged community members. At a glance, the previous year has been an exciting challenge for Squamish Youth Services. We kicked off the year with the opening celebration at Foundry Sea to Sky and Youth Hub, and are proud to be at 1 full year of operations. With our focus on fun, we delivered many successful programs and activities. Being able to partner with Foundry Sea to Sky staff, as well as other community partners on the delivery of youth services, allowed for us to provide timely and accessible wraparound care for youth. The previous year saw a lot of staff transition and the need for staff to be creative to continue to deliver programming through labor shortages. Despite all of this, we continue to see the positive impacts from our programs and strive to raise awareness of the Youth Hub and Squamish Youth Services throughout the community. Now that we've wrapped up our first full year of operating services out of the Youth Hub, I'd like to highlight a few benchmarks we've collected. Our total number of youth visits or participating in programs was 3,049. When tracking age and self-identified gender, we see for the 12 to 18-year-old range, the highest number being male at 1,674, female at 877, and those identifying as other genders at 194. For the emerging adult age range of 19 to 24, we see the highest number of males at 187, females at 15, and those self-identifying as other genders at 11. When looking at how our staff are spending time with youth, the Youth Hub is where the bulk of the time is spent at 64.9%. Registered programs at 19%, 8.1 of time spent engaging with youth in this community, in schools, and in neighborhoods, and 4.4 through out trips, and 3.6% with events. Breaking it down further, looking at our Youth Hub hours, Fridays from 3 to 7 were the most popular, with over 850 visits. Thursdays from 3 to 7 were second, with about 600 visits, and Saturdays from 3 to 7 with about 400. Since last fall, we opened our doors to youth during lunch hour, where we saw 266 visits on Thursdays and 209 visits on Fridays. As I mentioned, we had an incredible gathering a year ago on March 31st, 2023, where we celebrated the grand opening of Foundry Sea to Sky and the Youth Hub. With tours, lunch, youth festivities, and a truly memorable ceremony to bless the welcome totem pole, we are so thankful to be doing this work. Many excellent programs were delivered by Squamish Youth Services over the past year. We have developed a program matrix to ensure that each season we are able to hit our performance indicators for numbers and types of programs. The Youth Hub drop-in was an immediate success upon opening, with an average of 30 youth attending each day. Currently, the Youth Hub is open Thursday through Saturday from 3 to 7 p.m., as well as during lunch hours, as I've mentioned. Over the course of last year, we have integrated a variety of fun activities during the Youth Hub operating hours to keep youth engaged and to appeal to a broad range of interests. Some of these activities have included learning about taxes, birthday club, and tea with aunties, where Squamish Nation elders have joined our youth in conversations and learning opportunities. Sharing tea, bannock, and working together on arts and crafts, the aunties are building strong and trusting relationships with Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth. Having the Youth Hub open 3 days a week allows our small but mighty team the opportunity to host additional out trips and events in the community. One of our biggest weeks of the year, starting tomorrow, is May 1st to 7th, which is BC Youth Week, in which last year we had over 6 activities that took place. 2 successful events included a Star Wars night at the Youth Hub with themed food and fun activities for the 30 youth who participated. Additionally, with support from our Youth Advisory Committee, we hosted a youth carnival with activities, games, and food for 22 youth. Registration programs last year included bringing back the coveted Dinner Club, a program where youth learn to cook and share a meal together. This is becoming a staple of Squamish Youth Services. For each season, we had 10 youth registered, meeting our capacity for the space, and held a wait list for all of the interest. Additionally, we ran a mural camp because we heard throughout the Squamish Youth Strategy from youth that they wanted more programs around arts and culture. So we partnered with Squamish Arts, where 13 youth helped design and create a mural that's on our basketball court. We are so proud of the ongoing creativity with the Squamish Youth Services team to continue to bring new ideas into programming. Out trips allowed youth to participate at a low cost to attend opportunities like Fright Night at the P&E, hiking up at the top of the Whistler Gondola, going to Valet Illumina, and going horseback riding. We strive to engage with youth in the community at various events, like at the Farmers Market, the Brackendale Fall Fair, the Grateful Shred skateboard competition, and going to where youth are at in schools and at the Squamish Youth Council. As part of Sea to Sky Community Services reporting plan, we surveyed 23 program participants. There was a high level of satisfaction for the programs delivered and staff support they received. Here are some comments pulled directly from the youth. Their favorite things are being able to socialize, to relax, and play games, and saying it's fun, the inclusivity and positive support from staff, and I love being able to be on the Youth Advisory Committee to give my opinions. When hearing from youth in 2019 during the development of the Squamish Youth Strategy, it was clear that Squamish youth felt there were not enough mental health, substance use, and wellness services. One of the most critical developments and benefits to Squamish Youth Services this year is the ability to provide timely and accessible wraparound care to young people who participate in our programs. The integration of Squamish Youth Services within the Foundry Sea to Sky Center allows for a warm handover of youth directly from Squamish Youth Services to Foundry programs. This impact was seen for several youth, but one youth in particular highlighted this importance. A teen with a developmental disability was able to attend the Youth Hub drop-in with support from their one-to-one worker. The worker supported easing them into attending the Youth Hub, where our youth workers were able to engage, build a strong relationship through fun activities, and then also provide the support needed for them to be able to attend the dinner club program. It was in the Youth Hub where they interacted with our Foundry peer support workers, who helped them feel comfortable and confident enough to access Foundry walk-in counseling. This case highlights the impacts it can make when a youth is already familiar and comfortable with staff and the facility, so they can more easily take what is often a very big step into receiving one-to-one support specific to the challenges they are facing. The chart on the right side highlights the number of community referrals our team assisted with, which directly relates to 100% of youth reporting that participating in our programs increased their wellness, and 100% indicating they were satisfied with the support they received from our staff. A critical piece of work over the last few years has been carving out a distinct identity for Squamish Youth Services during the development of Foundry Sea to Sky. District of Squamish staff and council communicated the importance of maintaining distinctive programming. We worked hard at developing staffing models, program plans, and communications and marketing strategies that supported this process and are beginning to see how this will support our continued growth. Our team has been able to produce at least one social media post a week, as our YAC identified that this is one of the best ways to reach youth. We are excited to see Squamish Youth Services developing as an integrated yet unique program through the Youth Hub and other community-based programs. Looking ahead, we will continue to offer the best social and recreational programs and services we can for youth in Squamish. We will continue to engage with our Youth Advisory Committee and Squamish Youth Council to give the youth a voice in the programs and services that are for them. We will continue to develop our programs that provide youth with a safe, inclusive, and fun activities. And lastly, we will continue to build up our team's capacity by working with partners on programs, building up staff skills, and continuing to develop our service delivery model. By incorporating all of these aspects, we strongly believe that visits and involvement in programs will increase, and we look forward to working with the incredible staff team, our community partners, and the District of Squamish on providing services to youth in Squamish. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Council, any questions for our guests? Any discussion? Councilor French?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Very informative, very helpful. I'm wondering about a little bit about demographics. Is the center serving the youth that live far away from the center itself? Like, are you seeing young people from Brackendale, Garibaldi Highlands, Valley Cliff, or is it kind of just serving those that are living close by?
Thank you. That's a great question. We don't track which neighborhoods the youth are coming from because of the nature of the drop-in program. We want it to be very low barrier and accessible. I think anecdotally, I would say it's a variety of youth who attend our programs, and registered programs would have the ability to have youth being where we can provide transportation to youth as well. So that is a benefit to those types of programs as well.
Great, thanks, Mayor. And as our transit system improves, that would be less of a concern for me.
Thank you. Councilor Greenlaw.
Thanks. Through the chair, thank you so much for your presentation. It's just such an important service that you're giving to our community. So thank you very much. I noticed that there is a distinct discrepancy between the male and female users. There's about twice as many males using the center as opposed to females. And I was just wondering if you had any comments on why there is such a difference.
Thank you. Yes, I've noticed that as well, and our team have noticed that. Some of the reasons why I can kind of guess why that is the nature of the drop-in program, as well as our location with proximity to the skate park. We see a lot of youth who are coming in from the skate park after school. And other than that, I can imagine that they feel comfortable in groups to be able to attend the male gender. And we've actually started to develop programs that are specific to female to be able to encourage more female, self-identifying female youth to attend the program as well.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was going to ask if you've considered shifting your programming at all to attract more girls. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. Lots of familiar faces in the photos, so thank you to everyone who's made this such a success. It's really quite amazing. I'm just wondering if you, and it's more out of curiosity than anything, because I know a number of things have changed, but do you have a sense of what attendance and participation is like compared to the old youth center?
Yes, thanks for your question. That's really great. I actually see that the numbers compared to the old youth center are now very similar. Where during COVID, obviously there were challenges, and when we were providing community-based programs, when the youth center was closed, we had to do a lot more outreach and engagement to get youth to participate. And now I can see that the numbers are just about to where they were with the previous youth center. And I think that's due to the low barrier. They can kind of come and go as they please. So yeah, it's really great.
Thank you. Yep. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks for your presentation. How timely that we're just on the precipice of Youth Week and that you're here speaking. So that's fantastic. Let us know how we can help support. And thanks so much for speaking to the distinct identity that's being created through youth services and the integration with Foundry. I know that was one piece that we've talked a lot about over the years. I think you articulated really well both the huge amount of opportunity through the examples that you provided, as well as the work that's going on to still provide that kind of distinct feel for youth services. So thanks for the attention to detail there. You did mention that some of the programming had wait lists. So I'm just curious, what percentage of your programs are at wait lists, if you see oversubscription frequently, or if we still have room to grow with the existing capacity that you're working at.
Oh, yes. Thank you for your question. For our registered programs, we do see almost every program at full capacity, including out trips, dinner club, mural camp, all of our registered programs. And for our non-registered programs at the Youth Hub, we're also very much hitting capacity with our staffing levels and are working on ways to increase that through partnerships, as well as working with Foundry staff and having our coordinator actually be on the floor as well to support programs.
That's helpful insight. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? I think I'll move receipt of the report, and then I just have nice things to say. I have no questions, so I'll just move receipt of the report, seconded by Councillor French. And yeah, thank you for all the work, and running your programs is a huge task, and creating safe space and the right feeling in a space to for youth is incredibly challenging. And then to distill it all down to that short presentation that you provided us must have been a big task. So thank you so much. I'm really happy to hear that things are running at starting to run into capacity. That's a success story, and we need to figure out how collectively to increase that capacity and keep that going. And I think it was your last slide, or your second last slide, that showed the the numbers charted as to where things are trending, and I think that's great, and we should keep that going because the service is just so important for the community. So thank you so much for what you do and for coming to see us here tonight. Any other comments at this point? With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So now we have a few, Council, we have the next up is a couple items up for adoption. So first, we have the District of Squamish 2024 to 2028 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Pettingill. Seeing no hands for comment, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have the District of Squamish tax rate bylaw, number 3039, 2024. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Thank you. Would you like to speak to this? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Hamilton, go ahead.
Thanks very much. So speaking to this is I'm reflecting upon my motion, my vote on this when it first came. And I want to be sure that folks understand that my no vote to the first instantiation of the tax rate bylaw has to do with me coming to grips with how we propagate the taxes from one year to the next. It's not a fundamental concern about what the actual tax rates are at this point. So at this point, I do agree with the tax rates being set in this way. So just speaking to my lack of support for the motion last time. Thank you.
Clarity is always welcome around this table. So thank you very much. Councillor French?
Thanks, Mayor. And speaking in favor of this motion, I want to thank Councillor Hamilton for his passion and diligence in digging into this. It's worth the effort, and I'm glad that there's a member of our council who has the skills, knowledge, and abilities to really objectively look into these systems and make sure that what we're doing is fair for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, so next up, we have matter pertaining to the Cheekeye Cheekeye River development, and I will pass it over to staff, Mr. Villaniscus, to present on the two items. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jonas Villaniscus, Director of or Senior Director of Community Development. With me today is somewhere in the audience, Mr. Rolston, David Rolston, our Director or Senior Manager of Infrastructure Planning. And also we have finance staff, Rian Sousa, Director of Financial Operations. We're here today to recommend that Council schedule a new public hearing for the two bylaws that are at third reading related to the Cheekeye River development. And in order to do that, we need to rescind third reading on both of those bylaws. A bit of an overview of the Cheekeye Fan proposed neighborhood. So the development is a partnership between Squamish Nation and a local developer, Matthews West. The proposed development requires both an OCP amendment and also a rezoning. And both of those are required to establish the neighborhood and secure a park dedication for the Brackendale Farmers Institute Park. Just a quick overview of the development. It's 1,215 residential homes. 85 of those are affordable and 85 are market rental. The height throughout the development ranges from 1 to 6 stories. There's a good amount of neighborhood commercial space included. There's playgrounds and park space and trails, and a number of community amenities, including a $1.5 million cash contribution to the critical community amenity reserve, as well as the construction of the brief flow barrier. Council has seen periodic updates on this development review. So just highlighting a few relevant pieces that the application came in 2013. A lot of work has been done since then on understanding the hazard and planning for mitigation. In 2017, we had our first public hearing on the two bylaws. And then in 2018, we had to have another public hearing because the district, in the meantime, adopted a new official community plan. So the bylaw, the OCP bylaw that was being amended at that time was no longer in place. So we had to go back and do a second public hearing in June of 2018. And then shortly after that, council gave third reading to the rezoning and OCP amendment and established a number of conditions, majority of them related to hazard mitigation. The reason why we need to schedule a new public hearing, there's two. There is the fact that it's been more than 5 years since the last hearing, so it's just a lot of time has passed. The last council that went through the public hearing process is no longer in term. We have a new council. 5 years means that there's been a lot of conversations in the community. Council might have heard from the public, so the kind of the procedural danger is high on the old public hearing. So we, as a best practice, at the very least, we need to hold a new public hearing just because there's been enough time that has passed. Secondly, we have some new information. So in 2018, we presented a financial model which assumed that the post-event restoration for the Cheekeye barrier could be managed through insurance tools. In other words, it could be insured that the restoration could happen through an insurance claim. Further work has identified this as not a viable option, in essence, because insurance tools are not in long-term enough. They're very short-term compared to the life cycle and the lifespan of the debris flow barrier. So due to the above, the 2018 financial model assumptions can no longer be used as a viable option, and staff are working on investigating alternative funding mechanisms, which we will bring back to council in the public hearing package. So the next steps would be, if council rescinds third reading and directs staff to schedule a public hearing, staff will schedule a public hearing as soon as council agenda permits. This is a priority project for the district. We will bring forward third reading after the public hearing for consideration. And then if third reading is given, bring forward bylaws and a land development agreement for adoption. And that's it. And that's essentially the 3 recommendations we just went over. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Council, any questions at this point? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, I appreciate the staff report and the information. I think the rationale makes good sense. And the folks who were on council at the time are around this table today. So I think in some ways you could say that all the information would be new to those of us who are here and to many in our community. I guess my question is, how do we ensure there's been a lot of work that has been ongoing and there's a number of commitments that were made based on the last public hearing and the rezoning. As I read the report, the proposal isn't to reopen this as a renegotiation of that rezoning. It's really just to address one component which has changed over time. What is either the opportunity for council and community to reopen that, and or what is the risk of going back to public hearing from that perspective?
Through the mayor, yes, staff would recommend not reopening this application for other considerations, essentially, such as community amenities or the zoning, proposed zoning. And this application has been in since 2013, and we've been actively working on it since the very beginning. So it'd be very challenging for the applicant to be, renegotiating portions of this just because we have to do procedurally this additional step of holding a new public hearing. So from a procedural fairness perspective, staff are recommending that we just deal with new information and the requirement for public hearing. And if there's something that comes out of the new funding model, that needs to be incorporated into the agreements, then absolutely. But other than that, staff recommendation is to keep it the same essentially as previously negotiated.
Thank you for that. My second question was the staff report speaks to 3 conditions that remain outstanding. The other 2, so in addition to the operating maintenance funding model, there's the confirmation of all permitting approvals, as well as confirmation of securing land tenure. Are those elements that are still being moved forward by the proponent? And do we expect to have those in time for public hearing?
Through the chair, those are elements that are still moving forward, and there are still some items to be resolved, so it's not entirely clear if that will all be resolved by the public hearing, but that is the goal at this point.
And then my final question is why we aren't identifying in this evening's motions a specific date for the public hearing. Typically, I know we don't have to, but we often do, especially if it's a priority project. So just curious why we haven't identified a date tonight.
Through the mayor, it used to be our practice to always identify the date, and that practice has changed now. It allows more flexibility if staff can schedule a public hearing in terms of, if we need to delay it a little bit or bring it forward sooner. It allows for more flexibility. So that's why we're recommending that council just direct staff that we need to schedule a public hearing, and staff will work to bring this forward as soon as we have all the information available.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. And just working off of Councillor Stoner's last question, I had the same question. And next thought is, are we talking weeks away, months, years for public hearing?
Through the mayor, we're aiming for end of May for public hearing.
Okay, and staff reports generally include an alternative resolution. Sometimes the suggestion for an alternative motion indicates that there's no real alternative for one reason or another, and we don't even have that in the staff report. Sometimes we get told another action as directed by council. So with this report not even including an alternative, what does that mean? Like, are you telling us this is it? This is the only way to go?
Through the mayor, my apologies. I did not include an alternative motion because there really isn't one. Theoretically speaking, council could rescind third reading and not direct staff to schedule a public hearing. That's an option that is subject to council discretion. But procedurally, we have to hold another public hearing in order to move these bylaws forward. So that is really, there's no other option here.
Are you okay for now, Councillor?
Yeah, I might ask you to come back around to me.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, Councillor Pettingill, then Hamilton.
Yeah, there was one piece in the report mentioned that staff were pursuing capacity funding, and I wasn't clear for what portion of this. And, I understand that, our district is overwhelmed with work, and it's a real challenge. But I think we also recognize that Squamish Nation, I believe, is in much the similar boat. And I believe at different times we've talked about, are there opportunities for us to provide capacity funding to Squamish Nation to sort of work collaboratively on some of the things of mutual interest? And to me, this strikes me as one of those things where there's a lot of mutual interest and benefit. And so I'm just wondering if you can speak to how critical that element is, and is that sort of an immediate roadblock, or is that something we can contemplate and sort of think about a little more down the road?
Through the mayor, the capacity funding agreement is in order to provide the district with staff to manage the construction of the barrier, which ultimately that's going to be handed over to the district and it will be ours to own and maintain. And so we need to ensure that we have enough involvement during the construction phase just to oversee construction and ensure that we're comfortable with that to take ownership at the end. if things go smoothly with the public hearing and rezoning adoption, this could be starting construction later this year. And currently, the district doesn't have staff to dedicate to overseeing construction. And so this capacity funding agreement would allow us to hire a person to have involvement and oversee the construction phase. And also, it includes some elements for developing the local area service tax as well, which will be a requirement, creating the bylaws and basically covering all of the staff time required to do that, so that we have the financial mechanism set up when we take ownership of the barrier.
Yep. Follow up.
Yeah, and I may be getting too far down a rabbit hole, which isn't central here, but if I can pursue this a bit further, is there an opportunity to sort of recapture or have the service area or whatever the financial model is sort of ultimately fund and reimburse for these initial costs or capacity funding? That can become part of the financial model.
I'm gonna just, if I could, I'm happy if there's an answer readily available for this, but part of what's proposed here with rescinding this is to be able to get into having this exact conversation. So I think we're getting these could be very important points, but I think we're getting ahead. This is a mechanism that'll allow us to have the new information and have those discussions. So if there's an answer readily available, I'll take it, but this is about a mechanism to allow us to have this conversation in about a month or when the public hearing comes. But if there is an answer, I'd take it, but just general caution, council, on going too far down this, but we will really get into it once we achieve this piece.
Thank you. Through the chair, Heather Boxer, General Manager of Financial Information Technology and Procurement Services. The local area service tax won't actually engage until after the construction of the barrier. So it's not something that can be a retroactive payment.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. So through the chair, speaking to the timing, how quickly we can bring this forward. Mr. Bylaws, I think you said something about available information. Is there any information that's outstanding that we're waiting on either a proponent or some outside body for, or do we have all the information and we just need to collect it, collate it to a point that it can be shared?
Through the mayor, we're still collecting that information. That's my understanding.
And are there any critical pieces of information you foresee might restrict us? You might, anything that puts us at a high risk of not being able to start this process by the end of May?
I think I would reflect back to the last public hearing. We made a number of assumptions, which is typical. When you do zoning changes, you don't have all the detailed information in front of you, but you know what you need, and you know what sort of information or assurances you need in order to assure that development is feasible. So I think we're operating on the same basis here, in that we might come to council with full information if we can get there, or we might come to council with a set of assumptions towards which we're working forward to. And that's what happened last time. Last assumption was that we're going to find an insurance tool to backstop the debris flow maintenance. And that panned out to be not true. So we're back here. We might come back to council with another type of assumption and see if that works.
Okay, any further questions at this point? We are going to get it, as we've heard, we're going to get into the details of this going forward. So seeing no other hands, I'll move the first two staff recommendations around in the agenda. So one is rescind third reading of District Squamish, the OCP bylaw number 2500-2017, the amendment bylaw for the Cheekeye River Development number 2615-2018, and then to direct staff to schedule a public hearing as per the language in the agenda. Seconded by Councillor Stoner. I'll be brief to this. We don't see staff reports that often that on projects that span such a large time period, and I think that really speaks to the complexity of what's being contemplated here. So I appreciate that this wasn't just one council ago. It was prior to my election in 2018, that council. So I think just on that, this is a appropriate step, so we can really understand what it is that we're being asked to contemplate. So I'm happy to support. Any other comments, Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, again, thanks for the presentation and ensuring that we're on side with our procedural fairness components in terms of public hearings. Just want to thank staff and the proponent for their ongoing work in trying to cross off as many items on the list as possible. It has taken a lot of effort from both sides, and look forward to, I guess my request would be to get as many of those crossed off the list as possible before it comes back to public hearing, because I think that helps narrow the focus of the discussion, both with our community, with this council, as it moves forward. So I think this really is about the funding model for the barrier. And if we can focus that conversation there, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. And speaking in favor of moving this forward, this file has a massive amount of information and data attached to it. And I too am thankful to staff for combing through all of it and presenting it to us in an intelligent and understandable fashion. There's a significant amount of risk associated with this project. There's financial risk, there's risk to existing structures potentially, and environmental risk. And we have a good understanding of those risks because of the good work of our staff and the consultants that have been brought in to help out with it. I definitely think it's time to move this forward so we can get a third opportunity to check in with our community and our residents, and hold a public hearing as soon as it can be scheduled.
Thank you. Any other comments, Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, procedurally, this is the right thing to do. We do need to bring huge projects like this we need to make sure that the community's heard on the decisions that we make. I hope that this, it feels a little bit like one step back, but I hope it's one step back with two steps quickly forward to make progress. This is a project that I think we have a willing proponent with a project that is of significant value to the community. So I do hope to see this move forward quickly. Thanks.
Okay, so seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Before we get to the second piece, just in your agenda, the second recommended motion, staff recommendation, the motion, the wording is a little odd. So what I'll do is I'm going to move the first part, and I'll read out the correct wording for the second item, which is that council directs staff to schedule public hearing for District Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, the amendment bylaw 2306-2013. Seconded by Councillor Stoner. I think we comments hold on this one as well. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, Council, we're on to item 5A1. David. Okay, Council, I have a brief script here. I just want to run through to remind everybody about what's happening here. But we lost two councillors, so I'll make sure that we have everybody before we. That's okay. Just gonna take a quick. Actually, we'll get going. Okay, so We don't have a staff presentation at this touch point for this item, but staff is clearly available to answer questions of clarification. The purpose of this agenda item on this evening is for council to consider a decision regarding temporary use permit number 76 for the WLNG Flotel. On April 23rd, a public comment opportunity was provided for members of the public to make their views known, either verbally or in writing. Now that the hearing is closed, council is prohibited from receiving new information pertaining to the TUP. The public is reminded this is not a public comment opportunity. This is the opportunity for council to consider a decision. Council may ask questions and seek clarification from staff throughout the evening. The scope of the temporary use permit under consideration does not extend to the merits of the WLNG facility currently under construction or any other matters associated with the construction of the Fortis pipeline. I would also like to highlight that we are trying to make this a safe space for everyone. We're trying to make this portion of the evening a safe space for everyone. Therefore, I ask that members of the public maintain order and quiet during the process. Do not boo, clap, stomp, or otherwise disrupt the proceedings of council. And just as with the public hearing, there'll be zero tolerance for disruptive, harassing, or threatening behavior. In the event that an attendee or group is disruptive or impedes an orderly conduct of the meeting, I'll provide a verbal warning. And if the conduct does not improve, I have the discretion to ask the person or group to leave or to have them escorted from the meeting. And lastly, please note this meeting is being recorded and web streamed live, and that the recording will be posted on the district's website. Media may be and is present at the meeting, and the public can advise the media if they don't want their picture taken. So we'll start with, are there any points of clarity? Sorry, for those of you joining online, Councillor Hamilton's restarting his computer, or the technology is restarting, but he is physically in the room. So we'll continue. Was there any questions of clarity before we get underway for our staff? Councillor Stoner?
I don't have a question of clarity for our staff, but I do have a comment that I would like to make before a motion gets put on the floor, if now is appropriate.
Yep, go ahead.
So through the chair, as everyone is well aware, last week we sat through a public hearing on this topic. We as council, with the support of our staff, sat with our community to listen and receive 6 hours of continuous oral submissions with no breaks. During those 6 hours, we also received 119 pages of written submissions, some of which were form letters, but many of which contained unique, insightful, and new information. At the end of the public hearing, I put forward a motion to defer our decision on the matter before us so that we could, as decision makers, have the time to effectively and fairly evaluate all the submissions that were brought forward until the close of the public hearing. Thankfully, this motion was supported by council, but not unanimously. It's one of our primary roles as council in a public hearing, which is a quasi-judicial process, to ensure procedural fairness and that all of those who believe to be affected by the matter have a fair and equitable opportunity to be heard. As I reflect on the public hearing a week later and the amount of information received, I contend that some of my council colleagues' comments last week were at best an action that perhaps unintendedly risk undermining our public confidence in our process and disempower community members' participation in public hearings. At worst, it may show that they did not maintain an open mind during the public hearing or have an apprehension of bias on the matter before us this evening. As such, I would just respectfully request that my council colleagues consider making comments, either now or once a motion is on the floor, on their ability to maintain an open mind and address the issue of procedural fairness for all who participate in the public hearing by providing written and oral submissions. To me, it is important that this be raised this evening for my confidence in the debate around this table and the vote we're about to hold as a body of council. It is also important for me to raise this for our community so that they can be assured that the process is being held to a reasonable standard of procedural fairness. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you for bringing those concerns forward. There were options on how to reply there, so I will leave it to the group to see how they'd like to proceed there. Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I'd like to test a motion, if that's...
Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we reject the staff recommendation and deny the suggested TUP for the wood fiber flotel, and I'll speak to it if seconded.
I have a comment on a negative motion, which is if that motion is seconded as worded, just procedurally, I investigated the this is that we would still need to vote on approving if it's not successful, we'd still need to have a debate about the motion, about them issuing the permit. So the way to get to a resolution here is to move a recommendation, and then if you're opposed, to vote it down. So rather the negative motion, like moving to not issue, is as strange as it is, and perhaps I could look to our staff for better language to clarify that procedurally. But it is a bit odd, just in case there's other. Even if this one isn't seconded, I think it's important to understand what that a motion that's phrased in the negative achieves, just to make sure that we're all clear what we're doing. Am I doing okay in describing that piece?
You're doing great. It's if council decides to put a motion to refuse the TUP on the floor and council defeats that motion, it doesn't automatically approve the TUP. If council wishes to approve the TUP, they would need to pass a follow-up motion that still outlines the conditions and the parameters around the TUP.
So I'm okay to make a negative motion.
It's just I wanted to make sure you understood the what if. That's all. So that has been moved. I haven't seen a seconder. Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Pettingill.
Okay, thanks. I want to thank everybody who took part in the public hearing process. It's very important to engage in democracy, as democracy dies in darkness. I have spent 25 years studying Earth systems, with over 10 years working in and around the resource industry. I have been a woman in resource camps across the globe and have experienced firsthand sexual violence throughout my career in the resource industry. As an earth scientist, I am obligated to acknowledge that the scientific consensus is that any new fossil fuel infrastructure is effectively committing to a 2-meter+ sea level rise globally, equating to immeasurable expenditures vastly surpassing any economic benefit this project offers to our community. The UN has directly implored governments specifically to take action against climate change, and that we have 2 years remaining to, quote, save the world, end quote. My informed professional and experiential opinions notwithstanding, within my jurisdiction as a councillor, I support denying the issuance of this TUP for the following reasons, among others. Though I appreciate the efforts the proponent has gone to mitigate some social impacts and the commitments that they have made, that they have shown to hearing some of the people of the Squamish Nation, I still have significant concerns pertaining to the flotel that must be addressed prior to any consideration of issuance in the interest of community safety. First, there needs to be made public the gender and cultural impact plan so that it may be considered and informed by unbiased professionals. Second, I see no evidence that the debris flow associated with a potential Henriette Dam failure does not pose potential risks to the inhabitants of the flotel directly downslope, and I would like to see a professional assessment to ensure the safety of residents, particularly in light of recent intense heat domes followed by atmospheric rivers, which can exacerbate the dangers of infrastructure failure and slope destabilization. Third, I would like to see a cap on both the number of workers and the period of construction. It is simply a reality that large-scale projects tend to go over workers and time budget. If there is an excess of workers, they will live in some community and undermine the suggested advantages of the flotel. Fourth, we must not forget that this flotel is a solution for less than half of the required workers for this project to reach completion. The District of Squamish has been requesting for at least 3 councils now, and I reiterate this request now, that the 2 separate proponents join to provide a cumulative impacts report without which it is extremely difficult to accurately determine the impacts on community. Submissions by some supporters of the project imply that the district has been intentionally delaying process, which in my experience is false. We are trying to protect our community from the negative outcomes this project will likely bring, and that takes capacity, expertise, and therefore time. The proponent claims that this is a consent-based project, and this is what consent looks like. I hear a lot around this table that we exist by the grace of the province, when in fact I would argue we exist by the grace of the people. I have tabulated the public hearing feedback of our community respondents. 92% are opposed to the issuance of this TUP. Of the 8% who spoke in favor, about half of them were directly financially benefiting from this project. The people have spoken overwhelmingly in opposition of the issuance of this TUP, and I tend to agree for the aforementioned reasons. One parting note, I don't believe this TUP application is consistent with our OCP, and I am concerned that by approving this TUP, we will open the district up to potential litigation from members of the public, as the precedent is being set around the world by members of the public bringing legal action to various levels of government for their facilitation of fossil fuel industry over protecting individual rights.
Thank you. Comments? Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, we've heard that we need to make our TUP decision with tunnel vision in a silo, and that's why you won't hear council speak much about the broader climate, health, social, and economic impacts related to the broader project that this TUP would facilitate. I don't fully agree that we must or should disregard the broader impacts of our decisions. Most of the time, we do consider wider-ranging impacts. However, this is arguably moot here, as there are reasons why this TUP is not supportable, even within the narrow scope some say we must work within. The proponents acknowledged and reinforced the risk and impacts that their workforce may have on our community, so much so that they have largely ignored other critical impacts of this TUP. They claim to care about the risk to women in housing, but they've also said that if they don't get their way on a flotel, they will ignore these legitimate concerns because their timelines are more important than our safety. In other words, they only care about housing and women's safety when they're getting their way. This means I can't rely on their promises and the limited conditions in the TUP to meet the expectations of our community as outlined in its OCP. Let's be clear, the flotel is not proposing significant advancement on key OCP goals if we just compromise on a few less critical areas of the OCP. They are threatening us with risk and harm they themselves would create if they don't get their way. Supporters of WLNG have raised concerns about the impacts on and portrayal of workers with the flotel, TUP, and lost economic opportunity. We've not seen sufficient and accurate traffic impact assessment. We have given little consideration to the health and other impacts on housing of workers over the long term, right next to a toxic landfill and heavy industrial construction in an apparent hazard zone. I would never approve any other housing in such circumstances, and that's maybe why it's not allowed in our zoning. We haven't seen the robust cumulative impacts analysis on things such as the boat launch and highway traffic when the Fortis and WLNG workforces and activities are combined. We haven't seen their gender and safety plan, and we have seen no research to support the idea that the proposal will actually provide the intended level of mitigation. Much like this project is proposing, the Olympics were a short-term project that resulted in long-lasting impacts. Vancouver and Whistler captured permanent infrastructure that helped mitigate against these impacts, but with its last flotel, Squamish did not. This is something I often hear lamented in the community. It's not something I wish to repeat if I can avoid it. Housing and safety of women are non-negotiable, but neither are they excuses to ignore the many other impacts of this proposed housing. This particular flotel is not the only option available. There are better solutions more aligned with our OCP. We don't get those better solutions if we facilitate the short-term interests of developers over the short, medium, and long-term interests of our community. I'm frustrated every time I hear that we aren't allowed to say no, or there's no point in saying no, or if we do say no, we'll be ignored. It is the job of leaders to stand up and say no when it's hard and when it's appropriate. Most in our community do not have the privilege we do in these seats, and they don't always have the same ability to say no. We have an obligation to stand for our community even when we might wish to find procedural excuses to avoid making hard decisions. I ran to fight for what is right for us, not just me, and to stand up for my community even when it is hard. Squamish has punched above its weight over and over again advocating for our community, even if we don't always get what we want right away. I have felt very fortunate to be part of a group of strong leaders around this table, and I hope I will be able to stand beside each of you and support you as we make a hard choice, but the right choice, and continue to fight as hard as we need to afterwards. There are better solutions here, and we need to push for them. It is unfortunate that we are in this place. We have told the proponent over and over again that their consultation has been adequate. Much of the consultation has been with wood fiber restricted attendance and poor notification. I would invite the proponent to actually read and understand the OCP, meaningfully engage with the whole community and all of council on a workable solution, and and listen if we say engagement is not working. Then we can find an acceptable solution to the housing. We may not all love it, but we can find something that we can move forward with. Finally, I invite the proponent to clarify and assert that they will not proceed with any solution that puts women's safety or housing availability at risk if they genuinely care about these things. I cannot support this TUP as it stands, and I hope we will collectively come up with something that is more supportable. And I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair. I want to begin by thanking our community who participated in the public hearing in all of its different ways, physically present, tuned in remotely, provide written and oral submissions with civility and with decorum. The bigger topic of wood fiber LNG has been long debated and often divisive within this community. I was immensely proud of how our community showed up in a big way to respectfully debate the one small portion of this very, very large project. While we certainly don't always agree on the best way forward, one thing is for sure, our community cares deeply and passionately about where we are today and what tomorrow will look like. Even after receiving all the submissions from community, and even as I sit here and make these comments, I still remain very challenged by the decision that's in front of us today, namely because the scope of our decision-making authority. The decision before us is not to support or oppose wood fiber project as a whole, but whether to allow the temporary mooring of a large vessel for 650 workers on through the construction phase of this project. The development of the wood fiber LNG project as a whole, I've stated this many a times, flies in the face of climate science, as well as our local, provincial, national, and international climate commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That also is not the topic for this evening. I also contend that there are potential economic benefits to this project to our community. Also not the topic of this evening. There's no tax benefit, there's no CAC agreement that's coming with the temporary workforce housing. That being said, the approvals by other orders of government also don't mean that local jurisdiction doesn't matter and that we have no say. I went back and read the community charter, which I do often in this role as it guides what we do. Part 5, Section 15 outlines the responsibilities of council members and states that every council member has the following responsibilities: to consider the well-being and interest of the municipality and its community, and to contribute to the development and evaluation of the policies and programs of the municipality respecting its services and other activities. To me, in general, I don't have enough information on this permit to actually approve it as is this evening. Whether I support the motion on the floor or not, I'm still undecided. But there continue to be outstanding questions for me on whether this is actually the right decision for our community. Predominantly, I think that there does need to be a natural hazards assessment is really critical and necessary here. Our responsibility as a local government is in land use and planning. If this was a different built form, one that required a building permit, then a hazards assessment would apply here. While this is a unique building form, the mere fact that it's a vessel does not short us of our responsibility to ensure the safety of 650 person residential development from assessing and understanding, and if need be, mitigating the risks of the natural hazards. That is core to our OCP, it's core to what we do. The other reason that I continue to be challenged by this is that we are really challenged by understanding the cumulative impacts of this project as a whole on our housing and on our community. This is not a new request. It should not be a surprise to the proponent, to staff, to my council colleagues, or to the community. We have long advocated since 2014 and sought to understand the cumulative impacts of this project that combine both wood fiber LNG and Fortis components. We have raised the issue with the province over and over again, and most recently in the EA amendment specifically about this flotel. And imagine that, the province heard us. They actually put 2 lines in the EA certificate that says that the holder must establish a committee to engage with the District of Squamish in its community organizations no less than once per quarter and consult with parties to identify in this condition with the participation of Fortis on issues of impact workforce housing, safety, and community services. This must include socioeconomic metrics, quarterly reports, and potential cumulative issues arising from the concurrent workforce, housing interactions between wood fiber LNG and Fortis projects. This has not been done. So I'm not sure how we can actually move forward without that context. This is particularly true because the numbers that we continue to see are questionable at best. The application shows 610 workers at peak plus 50 ancillary workers on board, and that is only That in itself is 10 folks more than there are actually rooms on board. That's not to say anything about the additional 190 workers that are referenced in Woodfibre LNG's website or the EAO submission where they speak to peak workforce at 800 or 850 workers. So what is the plan B? Where do those workers go? We need to have those conversations before this is approved. I would like to raise my hands to what sounds like good work being done on the Gender and Cultural Safety Advisory Committee. This is critical and leading work. But I agree that despite being identified as really critical work, and I trust the proponent that they are sincere in these efforts and these commitments, that they will continue to uphold their commitments to this work, whether it's on the flotel or what alternative might look like. I'll leave my comments at that for now.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, thanks very much. Through the chair, I think everybody around this table knows that this is a tough question. I was very grateful to have this last week to reflect on everything we heard at the public hearing. It's been extraordinarily valuable for me to reflect on what our community has heard, both on the things that I've heard before and the things that are new to me, both in oral and written submissions. I was inspired by our community's courage to speak, their ability to disagree respectfully, and I agree with, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate to use names of members of the public. Well, a member of the public who referred to the public hearing as a demonstration of functional democracy. And I've reflected quite a lot on what that means, what functional democracy means in this context. A big piece of this question is about jurisdiction, is about who has the authority to say yes and to say no to what. In our zoning bylaw, the I3 industrial zone states that bulk gas and fuel loading storage facilities are a permitted use and specifically identifies the Woods Fibre site in Schedule A. It is that zoning bylaw, that is the piece where we had the authority to make a decision on whether we would allow bulk gas and storage facilities on that site. So that decision has been made. That's where we had our authority on the existence of this project. The question of TUP 76 is not a question of the existence of this project. The question of TUP 76 is whether a flotel is an appropriate temporary land use at the Woodfibre site. And even that small piece of this big puzzle is a difficult question. So when we narrow our scope to the question of the TUP and not the project as a whole, we ask ourselves, how does this proposal align with the 8 points that are outlined in our OCP, in section 31 of our OCP? And in those 8 points, my concerns on this TUP application, my largest concerns that are not associated with the overall project. I have many concerns associated with the overall project that are not the discussion for tonight. Traffic safety at the Site B and Highway 99 intersection. That's a direct traffic concern, which our TUP is attempting to address by not allowing any traffic to and from the flotel. I hope that works. And when I have reservations on our ability to monitor that, The ability for the district to revoke the TUP in a case of a permit condition violation means there are large consequences for the proponent in the context in the event of a violation. Hazard management is another concern. The Henrietta Lake Dam does create a natural hazard whose hazard has not been fully explored. For permanent zoning, this hazard would certainly be assessed. For temporary zoning, it's not clear to me that the hazard assessment should be alleviated. So I do have reservations about the absence of a hazard management plan. So I still have an open mind to this question, and so I would like to hear the remainder of my colleagues' comments before making a motion, before voting on this.
Thank you. Additional comments, Councillor French?
I won't be supporting this motion.
Okay, thank you. I can hear the, I know wherever we land, I can hear the wheels turning of my colleagues really wrestling with this question. And I'd also like to start by thanking the community for coming together at the public hearing last week to have a respectful conversation on what has been a long time, a challenging topic for the community over the many years. The many speakers took the opportunity to make their voice heard with grace, while those unable to attend provided over 650 pages of correspondence, including nearly 300 pages on the day itself, while over half of that came in during the meeting itself. I'm thankful to my council colleagues for supporting the decision to made that night to defer consideration of the permit until today to ensure everyone who engaged in the hearing process had their opinion taken into consideration during the decision-making process, which is where we find ourselves now. This motion is challenging for me. I would like to have a conversation with council around the pieces that we can move in this in the equation. I believe that I think I saw a sign to this effect earlier. The trust needs to be earned, and I'm wondering about opportunities for in our TUP process for to consider a shorter initial term and with renewal to give some space for these plans that are regulated by other bodies. The outstanding plans are regulated by other bodies, by the EA office, and I hope that they are, and I hope they're reviewed with vigor. And more importantly than that, I hope they're effective. So I'm wondering about a way to find, if we can find a way together to provide opportunity to earn the trust of the community around all of these issues. So I'm not going to support this motion, but I'm not in a position to support the TUP, the recommendation, the staff recommendation either. So I won't be supporting this, and if it fails, I'll look to put something forward that may be able to move us forward together. Councillor Penningill.
Yeah, Mayor, for what it's worth, I debated whether to move myself a motion to defeat or a motion to defer back to staff. Still thinking about it. I ended up deciding to support the motion to defeat because from my perspective, I do think there are better solutions available. Again, I don't know that anyone would love the solutions, and maybe that's a sign of a good one. But I think there are things that get closer to addressing everyone's concerns. I think that requires a lot of dialogue. As I mentioned, that hasn't happened. And so for me, a deferral is going to require some committee of the wholes and some community discussion to figure out through what those things are. And in timeline wise, that's really no different than defeating this, doing that same work and coming back with a new TUP. Like it's in many ways 6 1, half dozen the other. So if we want to go through, defeat this motion, put a new one in and end up at effectively the same place, I guess we could, but my preference is to just cut this, have those discussions, have that committee of the whole, have the proponent do the engagement that I think is needed, and figure out these, what conditions would need to be there. What does a solution look like? What does the location look like? What form of housing do we need? So I would encourage my colleagues to support this, and then let's move on with the work together of finding out what a solution looks like.
Thank you. Any additional comments before I call the question? Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, so again, like this is an industry that I basically functioned in for 10 years. And my biggest concern is we as a municipality do not have sufficient safeguards in place to protect us from negative social impacts. And we can't really fully understand the cumulative impacts of these projects with the information that we have at hand. So and some of the social impacts that I'm concerned about include toxic drug supply, which we have heard is like directly correlated with some of these camps, traffic accidents, waste management, gender violence, among other potentially unforeseen issues. I urge you to consider that we have to protect ourselves from foreseeable negative impacts before this TUP is issued, because it will be extremely difficult, possibly impossible, to address them retroactively. I don't believe it's socially responsible to issue the TUP at this time. And to be clear, a number of our comments have been about the context of this project, but our main motivations are the ones that fall within our jurisdiction that are legitimate concerns. We should have a hazard assessment of that flow zone. We should have a waste management mitigation plan. We should see that gender cultural piece as well. And to Councillor Hamilton's comments about the permanent condition violations, the bond that is being held, $2 million, sounds like a lot of money to people around this table. That is 16 days worth of penalties. That's not punitive to a multi-billion-dollar company. So to my mind, there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed before we can really have earnest conversations about this being a solution for our community.
Okay. I'm going to call the question on this one. So all in favor of the motion? And opposed? Motion fails. Thank you. Oh, sorry. That was Councillor French, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Hamilton, and Mayor Herford oppose. I'd like to test a motion that council, so it's essentially the staff recommendation with a 1-year term. And then I'll speak to it if it's seconded, and I'm open to amendments if once we're there, if there's other things that can happen to address concerns. Second by Councillor Hamilton. Thank you. I found, upon reflection of everything we heard from the public hearing and everything we've read from the public hearing to now, I found it particularly challenging with folks making submissions both for and against issuance of this permit using very similar arguments. A nearly consistent concern by all is clearly community safety, and in particular, the safety of the women and girls of the community. And again, with particular concerns as this relates to Indigenous women and girls, and rightly so. The Environment Assessment Certificate Amendment that was issued by the province in late 2023 added Condition 26 and its many subsections with the aim of addressing this matter through the requirement of a gender and cultural safety plan. This plan's not available publicly at this point, and so I can't speak to its content. However, as this is a condition of the EA certificate, it is the responsibility of those administering that process to approve, and if approved, to monitor its effectiveness, including reporting out as required and appropriate. And I compel them, as I did in my earlier comments, to do that with the utmost rigor to ensure community safety. Having the bulk of the workforce housed at the WLNG site with little to no access to the community goes a long way to address concerns of the community in this regard, but does not eliminate concerns on this topic. The safety of the workforce itself is also a concern. And again, this matter is also addressed by the amendments to the EA certificate, particularly in section 28. Air quality and noise monitoring in condition 30 also speak to worker safety and living conditions. So I'm also satisfied that staff have made an appropriate recommendation in regards to the access of facility taking place from Darrell Bay, as the cumulative impacts of traffic at the Site B intersection are unknown at this point. The sticking point for me has been Council's ability to affect change if it becomes apparent change of some sort is what's needed to further mitigate impacts to the community. Therefore, I've moved this motion for a one-year term with the possibility of one renewal, which is 3 years under our TUP process. When the renewal discussion takes place, we will have the benefit of all the plans not only being created and implemented and reported out on, providing opportunity to adjust course if needed, including not issuing a renewal if council deems appropriate. Trust needs to be earned, and the performance over this initial time period will provide additional clarity for the renewal discussion. Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Hamilton.
I'd like to make an amendment if possible at this juncture.
You can propose an amendment, and if it's seconded, we can discuss the amendment. Go ahead.
I'd like to propose, it's unclear to me exactly how to do this because this is amending the TUP proposal.
I will try to help you if I can, and we have folks in the room who can help us.
So I would like to propose that the security deposit be increased to $10 million.
I'm just going to check with staff before. Oh, I saw a hand. Thank you. Mr. Vilniskis.
Thank you. I'd like to clarify that there is an issue with changing the permit conditions as drafted. So timing is the time of the permit, whether it's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, that is council's discretion at this point. The terms of the permit, especially the security, has two issues changing. One, we need to seek consent from the applicant. Two, it potentially introduces new information that the public has to have the right to consider. So that potentially sends it back to the hearing stage. So there's two procedural issues for why we council shouldn't alter the permit conditions.
I'll need a moment to reflect.
Thank you. Comments on the initial motion and or additional suggestions? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I'm not inclined to support this right now. Sort of, we are where I was worried, or it was possible that we might get to where we're on the fly trying to debate conditions. I think there, even if we proceed with a flotel of some sort, I think given the community feedback and our own discussion, there are a number of things to resolve in terms of conditions. We've heard it would need to be worked out with the proponent. That's why I think there needs to be, at the very minimum, a committee of the whole to work through some of these things, if that is the direction where the majority of us want to go. I do not feel comfortable trying to work these things out on the fly, and I do not have confidence. I've heard that this proponent is litigious, and that if we revoked a permit, we don't have a big tugboat that can remove a flotel that decides to overstay its welcome. Don't have a great deal of assurance that we would be able to enforce the end of our TUP. So I would like to have a lot more, including from the proponent, in terms of agreement, in terms of compliance of these conditions and so on, or to work that through. I think if we want to amend what staff has here, it just requires more discussion than we can do comfortably on the fly tonight. This is too big of a decision to be making on the fly changes to a permit, in my opinion.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Anderson?
I take it, Mayor Herford, that your recommended changing the term to 1 year is not a change in the permit conditions that would require consent. That is, that it's not problematic. We can proceed with that. And this would not, unlike another suggestion made, require the applicant's consent. I'm going to speak then in favor of it. And I'll start by mentioning, though, that at the conclusion of last week's public hearing, I was confident in receiving the written and oral submissions that I was able to consider it all thoroughly and in an unbiased manner. There were, in fact, for me, a number of issues to consider in the staff report and temporary use permit provisions, not just a yes or no, and I'll elaborate on a couple of them. 2 concerns I have. Under the conditions of the permit 2F1, quote, any installations on the lands to support the long-term moorage of the vessel must be disabled or repurposed. I'm fine with that wording. I would be opposed to including removal of those facilities. And this was discussed during the public hearing in a question from one of my colleagues. The installation should not be required to be removed. There's no environmental management rationale for this, just the opposite, in fact, and I could elaborate on that. Workforce accommodation, perhaps a flotel, may need to be reactivated. And this is the experience of other plants of this nature. So you don't remove that mooring. Secondly, with respect to the Site B intersection safety, and to cite from the staff report, discussions around the use of Site B are still ongoing and are not finalized. I'm fine with that. I hope that conversation will advance and be further informed. Further, to quote from the report, given the known issue with the Site B Highway 99 intersection, staff recommend a condition of the TUP that prohibits flotel-generated traffic from using Site B for access. Should WLNG wish to use Site B for flotel-related traffic, they will be required to implement mitigation measures to the satisfaction of the district. This doesn't make sense. I've been involved with this intersection safety issue since 2008 in quite some detail, on behalf of the tenants and leaseholders and together with the Squamish Nation. The issue is a lack of a protected laneway for northbound highway reentry from Site B. The issue of cumulative impacts comes up already with southbound traffic from the gondola making U-turns there. This is something that affects the Site B reentry immediately. It's one of the key issues. It's not brought up in the reports. WLNG and Fortis traffic will be a minority of the traffic making this northbound highway reentry most of the time. So the question arises, don't we care? Have we ever cared about the risks faced ongoing by forest industry workers leaving this site? This question arises. Also, denying this access only creates or prolongs chaos for other sites and other routes. Instead, I suggest we should recruit WLNG and Fortis and their advocacy support in approaching MOTI for a solution to this long-standing safety issue at this intersection. Further, I support the rationale given for our not applying the DPA-1 guidelines. Further, regarding the concern expressed by members of the public that there is no legacy for the community, specifically with respect to the opportunity for a permanent housing legacy, well, I've been in conversation with WLNG for 11 years now, well before I got on the council, and that discussion has bounced around quite a bit. I'm concerned that we've been underprepared and continue to be underprepared, and we are distracted from addressing, as we might, legacy opportunities from this project. I support the caution advised in one of our letters received regarding, quote, negative characterizations of workers who will be residing in workforce camp or flotel accommodations. My own father came to this country as an immigrant in the 1950s with 2 trade tickets and stayed in BC work camps for most of his first year in this country. He started a career, he started a family, and contributing to this new country for him and this community. I'm concerned about this characterization of blanket characterization of people working and staying in these camps.
Council, just a quick word of caution on timing.
Yes, I'm just wrapping up.
Procedures at 3 minutes. I know it's a challenge. We're approaching 6. So if you
yes,
could just
I'm not
conclude,
alone.
please,
Having gone
I'll
over.
let you finish.
So another presenter at the public hearing is quite correct in reminding us that the workforce accommodation demand during the 2010 Olympics and highway upgrade construction was far larger than both of the workforce accommodation camps being proposed at the present time. I would quote Mr. Norm Barr and his advice based on his past experience in council. If you take your politics too far in front of the purpose of this application, you very much risk chaos in the aftermath. And I'm concerned that's what we are going to risk, especially on our waterfront. And we did hear from our waterfront stakeholders that they are concerned. We reject the flotel, we create new chaos, we prolong the chaos that currently exists. I'll leave my remarks to that, Mayor Herford.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor, and I guarantee I'll come well under 3 minutes. I first want to thank all those who spoke at the public feedback meeting last week. On any given day, it's intimidating to present to council, and last week I think was particularly intimidating. I saw neighbors get up and speak in opposition and then sit down beside each other and respectfully leave that hall together. That was a great example of how I'd like all of our public hearings and public feedback opportunities to go. I was ready to vote last week. I was ready to make a decision last week on this temporary permit. And once again, I'm ready to make a decision tonight. In considering this temporary use permit, I think it's important to recognize that the liquefied natural gas export facility currently under construction has Squamish Nation, federal government, and provincial government approval. Construction is underway. Construction is underway. It has been for weeks, months, and denying this permit is not going to stop the project that's currently under construction. After thorough review by District of Squamish staff, the recommendation from our experts is to grant this permit. The 1-year term, I can live with. The flotel as a work accommodation solution is basically what the community asked for. Many people in Squamish made it clear they fear the out-of-town workers. They also made it clear there's comfort in knowing the bulk of the workforce won't have access to recreation, entertainment, and leisure opportunities in Squamish. And one final note. I want residents of Squamish to be crystal clear that this vote on this temporary use permit is not a vote against the approved liquefied natural gas export facility under construction. This is a vote for or against the temporary use permit to house construction workers at Woodfibre. I'm voting for the most appropriate housing option for that workforce coming here for the next few years.
Thank you. Councillor Greenlaw.
I will not be supporting the motion on the floor. This option, to my mind, is the worst of both worlds. It opens us up to all of the risk without any mitigation. Honestly, I am very concerned about the amount of risk we are opening ourselves up to and our public. At the very least, we need a deferral of this TUP to discuss the outstanding issues. We need a bigger bond. We need hazard assessments. We need a waste management plan. And we need to see the proponents, both Fortis and Woodfibre, presenting their cumulative impacts of the two projects. And again, I will point out that 92% of our public feedback was opposed to the issuance of this TUP. I would like to point out that the correlation between resource camps and gender violence is not a negative characterization. It is a statistical fact. We need to believe women, and in particular, Indigenous women, when they speak out about their experience of the resource industry. I know many men who have worked in these camps. I've been in these camps, but the reality is most women experience sexual violence in their lives. So anyways.
Thank you. I'm going to go to, is there anyone that hasn't spoken yet that wishes to speak to this? Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on a couple points. I think the only context that I've only heard those in favor of the Woodfibre project speaking about this being a way to stop the project. I think those of us who have raised concerns about this TUP, I've heard them focus their concerns on the actual content of the TUP, and I think that's important. I think it's important to recognize that the EAO does not evaluate or enforce or worry about our OCP. their assessments and so on also do not negate our OCP. That is our job, and so I don't think we can rely on EAO mandated plans and so on. They may be interesting to help us understand if there's compliance with our OCP as a side effect, but they are not the tool. We don't get to farm out the enforcement and the care of our OCP to the EAO. That is our job, and we are not doing that with the limited conditions in this. We need, at the very least, more discussion on what conditions should be if we are to discuss this. I'm really concerned about the direction we are heading here. I think, you know, if this is the way we're heading, then I will have some amendments to try and add some just basic conditions as a bit of a Hail Mary, but this is not a good way to make decisions on an issue as impactful as this on our whole community. We need to take the time to do this right. We are under no obligation to rush. It is our responsibility to take the time to do it right. And so I would ask my colleagues to give that some consideration, and let's make sure, even if an approval is the direction we are headed as a majority, let's take the time to discuss what a tolerable approval looks like. And I don't think that happens tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. I won't be supporting the motion on the floor. I think for me, this is a good lesson learned on process and procedure. Appreciate staff's input while there was a motion on the floor that changing things like the security bond requires going back to the proponent and reopening for public hearing. To me, that means that we should have done our due diligence at committee of the whole and actually looked at the TUP requirements previously. So this is not an effort to try and stall this, but I do think that are outstanding concerns that can't be addressed or make me feel confident enough to support it at this time this evening. One would be to increase the security bond. This proponent has repeatedly failed to build confidence that they will adhere to the conditions laid out by the environmental assessment certificate. I don't see why our TUP would be any different. They received a warning letter by the EAO in 2023 for advancing pre-construction work before providing the required notice. They haven't established the committees that are required as per their EA certificate. And I could name a few others that continue to be challenged. And so I can't support putting this forward without clearer conditions and or a higher bond to make sure that our community feels like it is going to be in a decent place if something goes wrong.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you. I also thank staff for the clarity at this moment that it would be unwise to attempt to change the conditions written in the TUP. The security deposit, the size of the security deposit is a concern to me. I think we have a responsibility to ensure some accountability for our community, and 16 days is, in my mind, an insufficient level of accountability when this facility is already costing the proponent approximately $100,000 a day. So I don't see a lot of. I think we need to have a larger security bond. I think that trust is earned. As one of the signs, trust is earned, not imposed. I think that I think that there is value in giving a short-term initial approval of the TUP, but I also think we need to ensure that we have a mechanism to hold the proponent accountable that is greater than 16 days staying over their temporary use permit. The other conditions I'd like to see that I would put in a TUP, just to be specific, so that if staff do need to go back to the table with the proponent, is the establishment of the community impact groups that were mandated by the EAO, and that those things would be an absolute requirement of any renewal. If every piece of that has not been engaged with, then no renewal would occur. And some natural hazard assessment being done within that first year of the TUP issuance. For consideration of renewal, a natural hazard assessment would have to be complete. And those are my primary things that would make it approvable. But at this moment, the TUP as it sits, even at 1 year, is not approvable, supportable.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'll just venture my last comments before I call the question. I think with a TUP, whether it's a renewal or an application such as this, there is council discretion. So I was very intentionally open as to what that might be. I know there's concerns around the table, and I think justified concerns around many of these pieces, and there could also be others. So I wanted to leave that piece open, but I do appreciate the perspective. Right now, as I'm scoring it, this is a motion that's going to fail. If there is anyone has an amendment that makes this supportable for them, then this would be the opportunity. Otherwise, I'll call a question and we'll move on with our evening. To that end, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Sorry? Let's do that again. All in favor? Thank you. Opposed, if any? Councillor Stoner, Greenlaw, Pettingill, Hamilton. Motion fails. TUP denied. Thank you. That is we have a memo to deal with next. We've received, or does anyone have any questions on the memo? That's that. I tried to leave the door as open as I could for other amendments or suggestions, but that was that. We're on to the next agenda item. So do you have a question of clarity? We've got the experts in the room if you're concerned about procedure.
Yeah, as I voted in the majority. Well, let me think back to our procedures bylaw. Can we bring that back for reconsideration? I wasn't, so I was
just like if you could articulate the challenge, then we can
articulate the
maybe figure out the mechanism to address it.
while my council colleagues were making comments, I was trying to pull together what a motion to refer back to staff would look like. I didn't put an amendment forward because that felt like a substantive amendment. And so I don't know if I can.
I'm going to go to our
that here.
Procedural expert here to see what we can do.
Okay, I have the procedure bylaw here. So a member who voted with the majority, either for or against a motion, or in the event of a tie vote, any council member may, at any time within 30 days of the vote, bring it back for reconsideration.
Before I do that, my other question for you, Ms. Van Vlodo, would be the motion that was previously on the floor. Sorry, yeah, no,
I have a question with this too. It's bringing back the motion for consideration. The consideration was very binary. Was a yes or no. So I suppose you could amend that motion, but it's a lot of amendments to get. I was in the minority on that one. I do not have decision to make there. Besides the mayor's ability to bring back any motion within 30 days. But, Councillor Pettingill.
I would like to suggest, and sort of reiterating something I made forward, if the concern is, there may be something workable of some form I, I would suggest that it makes sense in any case to have a follow-up discussion, maybe at a committee of the whole with staff to figure out what happens next and how we move forward next. And that could be any number of things. I do think it is a bit of a wide-ranging discussion. That may be the cleanest path. It is not. I've heard that there's. I think there still be some work to no matter what the path is, and so I think timelines, give or take, align where we could be doing that work, having those discussions, and come back for another conversation if we need to.
May I clarify through the chair to staff that a denial of this permit means that the proponent cannot bring something back again for another 6 months unless it's substantively different. So there's no opportunity to address some of the issues that were raised by council and see if there's a middle ground.
Through the mayor, that is correct. So the motion was defeated, which means the permit the permit is refused, and unless council brings it back for reconsideration, that means that a new application has to be submitted, and in order for this to keep moving forward, and then a new application has to be substantively different than the previous one. Otherwise, the applicant has to wait 6 months.
Councillor Pettingill?
For clarity, though, had we not gotten here, my understanding that there couldn't have been a motion to defer. That would have had to have been the motion. We couldn't have amended the motion to approve to a motion to defer. Is that correct? It's sort of, we had that opportunity. So if we bring this back, we are debating again a motion to approve and then with no additional conditions. And we're sort of back to the same vote we just had. Right, there's not an opportunity to defer if we bring it back.
I suppose with any motion, there's opportunities to, because it is the motion, not the topic. So the motion would come back. It could be amended. I don't know how, I'm speculating now into how we do that. I did my best for the group to try to provide as many open doors as I could throughout that process. So this is something that that anyone that voted in the majority or myself can bring back. So I could have that discussion, but I don't think this is something that is worth further assessment tonight. Just given where we are, I'm open to hearing from anyone that voted in the majority if they see a path through that. But I'm struggling to see that at this point. Would you like to? Okay, so that's where we are. We have an agenda. We have the remainder of an agenda to get through. My apologies if there wasn't clarity in our process. We followed our normal process here. So any hands or any other comments on this? Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
So, seeking clarity, anybody who voted with the majority may bring this question back to council, correct?
Yep, that's correct. And the bylaw read for 30 in the next 30 days. And I suppose now would be.
One of the major concerns, or the major concern staff raised for changing the conditions of the TUP was the necessity to communicate with staff. Is it against our bylaw for staff to communicate with the proponent? Is it against our bylaws for staff to communicate with the proponents before we reconsider this question?
We heard from our staff earlier on one of the topics that I heard some comment on, including yourself, that that may be considered new information, and if required consent, and may constitute new information, which may put us back to another public hearing on this matter, which is, but that may be the procedural path. If those are changes that are crucial for you to make this supportable for you, if someone wants to bring this back for reconsideration.
Is a public hearing a requirement of a temporary use permit, or was it a choice?
I'll go to staff on this one.
The district's practice has been to hold public hearings, public comment opportunities for temporary use permits. The legislation does state that it isn't necessarily a requirement when issuing a permit.
Yeah, go ahead.
As I understand it, I'll look over here to correct me if I'm wrong, but because we have opted to issue a temporary use permit, we have to follow all the regular rules and regulations of a temporary use permit. Because we did opt to one, we are now tied to that procedure.
And
public hearing, thank you.
And I would also, and even if we weren't, if we were to do a public hearing, receive feedback, change course, and then have a vote on something essentially different, that's not what we were striving for when we chose the path of holding a public hearing. So I would say that would be a new public hearing. I think, yeah, we've had a request for essentially a timeout from staff to make sure that we are operating on the best information possible. So we're going to take, I'm going to round that up. We'll reconvene at 7 o'clock. Okay, thank you. Sorry, that was a bit optimistic, wasn't it? Okay, 8 o'clock. Yes, thank you. That clock needs to be fixed. We're in recess. Thank you. Okay, everybody, thank you and welcome back. We're just back from recess, and I'm going to pass it over to Acting CAO Stoner.
Thank you. We heard some discussions about procedural options. As I understand it, tonight, if one of the majority or the mayor wanted to bring the motion back and the council voted, discuss this motion tonight, that could be done. And then through that, we could amend the motion to send it back to staff if that's something that council chose to do. The benefits of that, it wouldn't delay the permit application for 6 months. But we would certainly be going back to public hearing, which we are likely doing anyway, so.
Okay, so Councillor Pettingill, do you have a question on this?
Yeah, I mean, my recollection is when we've discussed this issue before, a motion to refer back has always been characterized as a fundamentally different motion rather than an amendment. And so I'm a little bit concerned that now sort of on the fly, we would think that that's an appropriate thing to do. It's always been, again, at public hearings in these discussions, it's a motion to defeat, a motion to defer, or a motion to approve. And those three can't morph into each other. It has been my understanding to this point.
I would certainly look to staff to assist me with this, but if this goes back to staff, we will be going back to public hearing, if that was answering your question.
I think the question, sorry if I could, a question that I'm left with with your comments, which I think might be the same question, but might not, is if this comes back, it's the exact question that was posed, the motion that was posed, or is it the topic itself? That's the question.
If council votes to reconsider it's a motion, so it isn't actually the topic. So the motion would have to be reconsidered.
Councillor Hamilton?
A question of clarification for staff. A sticking point for me is the inability to make any other changes or suggestions. Suggestions is the wrong word. Any other changes to the temporary use permit other than the things written in the motion. Do I understand correctly that we are unable at this juncture, council is unable at this juncture to make any other recommendations, suggestions, or conditions other than those outlined in the staff, in the agenda?
Through the mayor, that is correct. So if any changes are made, the public has the right to inspect the permit, speaking legislatively, before council considers it. And so the permit, essentially, if we're changing conditions in the permit, some of those conditions might need the applicant's consent, and that presents new information then, changing the conditions, so that we have to hold another public hearing, because the public hearing is kind of a standard that we've established for this application at the outset of the process.
So, yeah, okay. Councillor Pettingill, and then I think we need to get to resolution here. We've had a motion. It was seconded. We commented. We voted. So we either I need to hear from the majority that would like to reconsider this, or we need to move on with our agenda, which has one more item before adjournment. Councillor Pettingill.
So if I'm correct, if we stay with where we are with our decision we've made, that would not preclude council before, like in the near term, from having a committee of the whole discussion or discussions on what a successful solution would look like. It does not preclude the proponent from having those discussions and doing that work, so that at the appropriate time, something could be brought back more expeditiously. It's not like no one can do anything or even think about this for 6 months or whatever, actually, as long as we're not contemplating a new TUP, sort of preparatory work and so on can be done in the interim?
I would say yes, and perhaps there's a developed plan B. I don't know. Like, there's too much speculation there to really go too far. I will say that if council doesn't exercise their reconsideration this evening, there's 30 days to do that. I'm not comfortable at this point using my authority to do that, given that it was my motion that failed. But I'll consider that that option as it is available to me for the next 30 days, as it is to the majority, to the folks that voted in the majority on this subject. So my preference is that we move on. In this situation where those that voted in the majority can bring something back, and the mayor, that exists in every decision that we make. So I'd like to move on with the rest of our evening, and I think it's clear that this matter, regardless of reconsideration or not from council, is something that we're likely to hear more about as we go forward. So I think we need to move on with our evening and see if we can find a way forward. As in future, but I don't think that's going to come about right now. And I'm not seeing any hands from those that voted in the majority shooting up for that. So I'm going to move on to, we do have the next piece is a memo that is just for information. We do have some staff, I believe, that are available to answer questions this particular item if there are any. So any questions on the transit memo? Yep, go ahead.
Just want to clarify, and I think because it was talking a bit about what pieces were and weren't supported, I just want to clarify that the oceanfront expansion for 2024 is supported. We're not having to wait until 2025 until that starts.
Through the chair, yeah, Brett McMurtry, Manager of Transportation. That's correct. It was supported for 2024 implementation.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity. That was an exciting piece to see there, as well as in a document that I know everyone we worked hard on and we're well positioned to see more. So I was hoping for more, but I think that piece is really worth celebrating, as we have a new community asset coming online soon that is going to be immensely popular. I think that ensuring that folks can get there via our transit system is really important. So thank you for that. For that piece and for the clarity. Other questions on this? I'll go Stoner, Councillor Stoner first, then French, then Greenlaw.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm there was in the staff memo a bit of a discrepancy in terms of the number of vehicles that are required for the Squamish conventional expansion, which I appreciate has not been funded by BC Transit, unfortunately. But in one part of it, it says it requires 3 vehicles, and the other one, it says 4 vehicles. I'm just wondering which number is correct, and if that may have made a difference in their interest in funding this important part of our transit system.
Hello, I'm Dora Gunn, the transportation planner with the District of Squamish. Through the chair, so BC Transit actually has given us both numbers. So I'm not 100% sure which one is the correct one. I do know that it would not have affected the decision, though, either 3 or 4.
I know, I think we're all combing through to see if there was a missed. Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. When the expanded oceanfront service launches, will there be appropriate transit infrastructure along the route out there? So I'm just wondering will the progress, or is the progress out at the oceanfront far enough along to effectively accommodate this transit expansion and have people experience the service in a positive way?
Through the chair, there will just be one stop down there, and it will just have a pole, as do many stops in town, but it should function adequately for people to use it.
Thank you. Councillor Greenlaw.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Through the chair, I just have I guess it's a request for information, so I don't know procedurally how I do this, but I'm wondering if you might have access to information about the impacts of prioritizing regularity of buses as opposed to maximizing its usage. Do you know what I mean? Like if we have a bus that comes 5 after the hour every hour, as opposed to every time it can come, which turns into a schedule. But I'm just wondering how that impacts ridership and if you have that information available. Thanks.
Through the chair, so that is absolutely something that is considered in scheduling. So if you can create a route that allows the bus trip time plus a little recovery time and allows it to happen on some regular frequency, it does help riders for sure to be able to understand when to get on the bus. So we try. But the Squamish system is really maxed out as far as the usage of our vehicles. So during peak times, all of our vehicles are like as used as they possibly can. And we also try to meet the school bell times. So that's another challenge. And so the current schedule is as good as it can be. But with any reconfiguration that might happen in the future, that timing that you mentioned is absolutely considered.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great. So I'll move receipt if there's a seconder, seconded by Councillor Stoner. And I'll just say thank you for I know that a little more than a little frustrated with others, not with our staff. So namely being the province around transit expansion funding. We've got a great plan that I know you folks worked very diligently on and was supported by council that we're struggling to get funded by the province. So I have and I will continue to raise this point with the province and hopefully we can see some deeper investment in this area going forward. But I'm very happy to see any increase is a good increase. So I'll have absolutely accept the increase that's offered. And there was never any doubt about that. But I think this is a very critical piece of work, and our community has been demanding expansion both internally and regionally. So that's a fight that I know my council colleagues have all spoken on as well in the past. So I look forward to continuing those efforts. So thank you very much for your work, and any frustration expressed is pointed elsewhere if ever in doubt. So thank you so much. With that, I'll call the question. Is there any other comments? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. I'm looking for a motion to terminate this meeting. Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Good night.